Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. This is going to be my experience with having BPD and depression throughout my life to my ripe old age of 27. This isn't really going to be a fun video, but it'll have a decent enough ending. Before we even start though, I want to go over a couple things. First, I'm not pulling any punches in this video. No internet speak about unaliving and whatever else. I'm using real words because these are real problems. It won't be intentionally dark, but it's within the territory. Second, this is going to speak on mental illness, depression, and abuse, and some of the more graphic ways people cope with these things. If you are triggered by anything surrounding this topic, I highly suggest you click away. Lastly, this is not going to be a replacement for real help, just how things panned out for me and why I can personally tell you it gets more manageable. If you are suffering, I personally suggest you seek professional help. Alright, on to the video. So, this particular story starts when I was pretty young. I don't know exactly when my depression kicked in, but I've been told the story when I was 6-ish or so. My parents used to fight quite a bit growing up. My dad cheated on my mom a few times, and she quite obviously was not a fan of that happening. Me, being in the middle of all this, kept a diary as many smaller children do, and in that diary I once wrote, "Mom and Dad are fighting again. It makes me want to kill myself." Under normal circumstances, this would go under the radar, but my mom happened to read that and decided enough was enough between her and my father, and they got a divorce shortly after. I would be placed in therapy in school, but it never really went anywhere. I believe that was the first confirmed time I had thoughts like that, but I was always a little odd as a child. Some people use the term old soul to describe me, when I think the term really just denotes a child that has lost their innocence through their environment. As I grew up, I would hang out with what other people would call the weird kids, although to me they would just be called friends. I always had a problem with identity and had an easier time getting along with people older than I was. I think for me at least, this problem with identity and wish to be more normal would be part of the cause of my depression. Later, I learned this was a sign of BPD. I would always second guess my interactions with people, thinking I might be too weird, and at the time I cared a lot about how others viewed me, so it weighed pretty heavily on me. To make matters worse, I moved about 20 ish times throughout my childhood, so I never really had a chance to feel confident in my friendships. I never got to learn how to maintain friendships because they never lasted long enough to enter the comfort stage. It was all surface level. This next little section is going to be times when I was at my lowest points in life. These stories are not meant as a woe is me, feel bad for me inclusion, but as things that added to my mental decline further. If you suffer from depression, some of these stories may resonate with you. And if they do, the conclusion to the story is that I'm still around and kicking, and I want that to be the real message that comes across. During one of the moves, I was living with my father and his girlfriend at the time, of who the girlfriend was extremely abusive. My dad is a good man, but he just was not around enough to know that these things were happening. She would pit my sister and myself against each other constantly, punishing us on a whim. There was one specific instance where she didn't like something I said, so she decided to chase me around the house until I was cornered, then beat me until I was curled up on the floor sobbing. Abuse was a regular occurrence, and added to my wish to not be around anymore. Another instance was when I was living with my grandparents and going to school there. I had my first girlfriend and kiss, and was finally thinking things were looking up. I even felt normal, even if I didn't really get along well with the people at the school. This feeling of normalness would be something I would chase for a good portion of my life. It would not last, however, as in her defense, we were both kids under bad circumstances. She would break up with me, and I did not take it particularly well. Lots of crying, lots of escapism through video games, and a few particularly bad nights of crying myself to sleep on the couch, staring at my grandfather's shotgun rack. In senior year of high school, I would join a group of friends with my sister, and we were all very close with one another. This dynamic would change when someone would burn bridges with the entire group, causing a shakeup in the friendship. This resulted in one of the girls targeting my sister and my girlfriend at the time, spreading rumors about both, causing my girlfriend of the time to leave me and my sister to become incredibly upset. I would retaliate by standing up for my sister and ex, and was promptly ostracized from this group of friends. I would then spend, for the rest of the school year, the entirety of my lunch period sitting in the bathroom stall instead of even trying to hang out with others, even when I was eventually allowed back into the group. This was around the point where I basically gave up on trying to make friends and decided I was better off without anyone, adding to the downward spiral. From high school to college, things would change. I spent a lot of time alone in my room, no friends outside of online, and no real hopes or dreams. At the request of my mother, I signed up for a college theater class. Our theater teacher at the time was not really a great person and would end up getting fired later, but the friends and other staff I met finally made me feel like I was a part of a community. We were constantly around each other due to scheduling, would throw parties and drink and smoke, and everything was exciting. We all had a friendship shared and time spent in creating projects, and it was wonderful. Yet at night, in the moments I had by myself, I still felt incredibly alone and depressed. I did not understand what was going on. This would bleed into the time I spent around them too, and I would constantly feel distant and disconnected. This also affected my acting because I physically could not be in the moment. I would look for ways to express my discomfort and would pick up cutting myself, hiding it with hoodies and other clothing. For me, it felt good to turn my mental pain into physical pain. Things would change once again when a new girl showed up to the theater. We would begin dating, and it felt like all that pain I was experiencing was stripped away from me, as I had something new and precious to focus on. The relationship was not perfect, and I was certainly not a perfect boyfriend, but the relationship was ours, and I finally felt like I had someone in my corner. We were just two people who had some issues brought together by fate. This relationship would honestly teach me a lot about myself, and in hindsight was a very good learning experience. Out of respect for her, I will not go into how the relationship ended, but it was not great. I had spent that year and a half in the relationship not focusing on my wants, needs, or worries, and when it ended, the levee broke and all those repressed feelings hit me at once. This was, by and large, probably the lowest I've ever felt mentally. I was a night stalker at Lowe's at the time, and I was going from aisle to aisle, bawling my eyes out. One major theme for me specifically is placing a lot of weight into how a crush, love interest, or partner thought of me. I had a very bad issue where I fixated on my love interest, placing them on a pedestal, and any interaction I had with them was later analyzed by me mentally, beating myself up over where I went wrong, or feeling on top of the world if things went well. I had this belief that if just one person was interested in me, and we were a couple, I could finally feel normal and not stress out so much. I would go out of my way to do literally anything they needed and try to be the perfect partner. I would cook, I would dote on them, I would buy them gifts, anything they ever needed, I would try and take care of. While the relationship was going well, I was king of the world and everything was picture perfect. When things went sour, I would work twice as hard to try and regain their interest. As you can probably tell, this bordered on obsession and was extremely unhealthy. As a bit of a side tangent that will make sense soon, I always had an issue with the idea of being medicated. As many depressed people will probably tell you, there is this worry that being medicated takes away that special part of you that can change or warp who you are. It's kind of ironic in a way that people think removing the suffering from yourself will take away your uniqueness or spark. Anyway, to stop myself from doing something silly, I decided to start taking medication. The thing about medication is that you need to try out a whole lot of different ones before you get one with the least bad side effect for you. From starting medication, things were not exactly a straight shot to happiness, but they got better. As a side effect of talking to a professional to get medicated, I was also diagnosed with BPD and told it was probably the result of previous trauma growing up. In hindsight, the BPD diagnosis makes a lot of sense, and my life growing up certainly exacerbated the issue. Constantly moving leads to the loss of friendships and the feeling of abandonment. I've never really felt like I had a stable place to learn about myself, as most of my friendships never reached a deeper stage. I would constantly vibe for the attention of friends and love interests, and would often become distraught when I was ignored. Good times never lasted long because there was always something that would kill my mood and take away from the current moment. I also had a bad habit of idolizing the people around me and placing them on pedestals when the reality is they are just normal people with their own issues. I also personally experienced what I would later find out would be some form of manic episodes. For me, these were bouts of energy that I would put towards a task, although it didn't always work out that way. When I was manic, I was always full of energy, witty, more sociable. I would view myself as a better person when I was manic, and would miss it when it would pass. These episodes would happen out of the blue or during a particularly stressful period of time. For me, this would also present with what I could best describe as religious delusions. I felt as if the universe was talking to me during these moments of time, telling me secrets and giving me signs. I remember driving home from work one night, crying and singing along to a song, and felt as if the universe was pointing me a certain way. After the relationship and starting medication, I spent a lot of time alone. Friends change, colleges, things move on, etc. It took me quite a while of being alone before I understood that being alone, being different, being depressed did not reflect on my worth as a human being. People say that time heals all, and that's simply not true. What time allows for is scar tissue to form, for you to become used to things that you were experiencing, for you to reach a new equilibrium. You don't exactly heal, things just become different. And different can be good. Change is, at the end of the day, unavoidable and not something to be scared of. I don't really have any tips to reach that new equilibrium, but I can help you begin the journey to get there. Again, I have BPD and depression. If you have something else, this may not work for you. For starters, the biggest thing that will help most people is to disconnect your self worth from how you are viewed by others. This is incredibly difficult to do, fair warning. But freeing yourself from the social expectations you've placed on yourself reduces a massive amount of stress from your shoulders. I constantly felt the need to positively add to others' lives or I would be thrown away, which led to me acting like a jester, performing nonstop for the approval of those around me. I'm still allowed to try and be funny, but there's no longer an expectation for myself that I have to entertain others to keep my friends. My friends are still around and hanging out with me without that massive overhead. I get to be a more complex person than the mask I put on, and I'm allowed to be sad, upset, happy, etc. I also have come to terms that some times in my life are allowed to be boring. I've experienced so much stress and excitement, good and bad, from growing up that I found it hard to be in a quiet time. I constantly felt the need to elevate a situation and not let myself rest. I never gave myself a second to unwind, nor knew how to relieve the stress I had built up over a period of time. This just comes with placing yourself into that situation and learning how to relax. Relaxation, in and of itself, is a skill, and it does take time to learn to let go. Medication is also something I highly consider looking into. It did not solve my issues, but it certainly made them more manageable. As for mental changes or feeling less special, that has not been the case for me at all. I no longer experience manic episodes, and while I personally miss it, I fully understand that my positive fascination with mania is a maladaptive behavior. I've also experienced less outright depression, although it and sadness are never truly something that goes away. This is by no means an exhaustive list of things to help, but just a couple of things I personally had to figure out. I skipped a couple things while exploring my past. I don't want this to turn into the suffering Olympics, nor make this into a competition. I fully understand that the struggles people face are as different as the people who live those lives. I just wanted to be able to show anyone who watches this video that despite what I've faced growing up, along with dealing with depression and BPD, I, at 27 years old, am finally at a point where I can say I am complacent with living. I'm no longer fighting against my mind for attention, for love, or anything else. I've mentally reached a place of comfort, and if I can do it, I know others can too. This isn't to say that I don't have unmet wants, desires, dreams about the future. Those still exist, but I feel more comfortable in the idea that those aren't as far away as I once thought. I no longer have this hanging feeling of dread thinking about the future. And with that, I'll bring this video to a close. It does get better, and it does get more manageable. I hope you enjoyed hearing from me, and I hope you all have a good night, and thanks for watching.